It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop. Ever. Until you are dead.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. We've got another interview going on. This time it's from DC Comics writer Tom Taylor as well as EIC Marie Javins with the Washington Post. Now, I enjoy breaking down these interviews, kind of taking the quotes and really dissecting things and looking at kind of doublespeak and all the things that they're actually kind of saying, or some of the hypocrisy and whatnot in there. Now, I do want to say this: if you see an article or an interview that you think is interesting, that would be of interest to me or to the people on the channel, definitely send it to me, via email at wesdigscomics@gmail.com, or just you can DM me on Twitter. You can't put the article link in comments because YouTube will delete them unless you're like a channel moderator or something. So if you ever see something, you're like, I bet Wes would do a great job with this, send it to me. There's a good chance I'll actually cover it here on the channel. There's been at least probably 50 videos where I've made content about things I was unaware were happening until someone actually notified me of them. And that even includes a couple of the bigger videos that have been very popular on the channel. So if you ever had the 411 or you want to hear my take on something, send it to me, and there's a good chance I'll get to it one way or the other. So now let's get to this, and what this interview really demonstrates, specifically from Tom Taylor, but also Marie Javins as well, is the absolute disconnect between DC Comics and reality. The disconnect between DC Comics and their actual customers. You definitely get the feeling that they believe that they're on top of things and they have the everything scoped out. They know exactly what's happening, and it's absolutely it's ridiculous. When you look at the title of this interview, which is the story of how Superman came out as bisexual, it makes perfect sense. And then you get into the gist of what Tom Taylor's trying to say, that we don't want the Superman to be only known as bisexual. Well, look at the title of your article, sir. I would say that you've done a very poor job of communicating what exactly ever it was that you were trying to get through to people. And let's be honest, that is what they are trying to get through to people, but Tom Taylor doesn't want, or in DC Comics, and I don't blame him, they don't want people to think, well, Jon Kent, is some type of token character. That, this was more of a natural evolution of the character, but obviously it wasn't. Well, you know what? Let's get into Tom Taylor and why there's an enormous disconnect. And if this is what he was trying to do, it was not successful. This is the quote from Tom Taylor himself, the first one at least. First and foremost, I wanted to establish Jon Kent as Superman. I didn't want the narrative to be DC Comics creates new bisexual Superman. I wanted it to be later. I wanted it to later be Superman comes out, because that is so much more powerful. Sorry for tumbling over that. The next issue isn't going to be some big speech about it. The kiss is just something that happens in the comic. We can dissect this many ways. I love this one part here. I wanted to establish Jon Kent as Superman. How many issues was he Superman in Superman Son of Kal-El? 3? He wasn't Superman in the first issue. He was just going to be Superman. I don't believe his father leaves until the second or third issue. So he had established, I wanted to establish Jon Kent as Superman first. I established it for 2 issues. Get out of here. As if we're too stupid to understand what the words are. Obviously, I imagine Tom Taylor and DC Comics don't think comic book readers are able to read an article in the Washington Post, or we don't have access to the internet or something, or we're just too stupid to see the absolute bullshit in what he's saying there. And then this next part, I didn't want the narrative to be DC Comics creates new bisexual Superman. Well, that might not be what you wanted, but that is the narrative. Look at the title of the very article that is quoting you from the Washington Post. the story of how Superman came out as bisexual. It makes perfect sense. Also, if that was the intent of the rollout or the coming out of Jon Kent as an LGBTQ plus character, listen, I have never, in my few years as a comic book YouTuber, gotten more than maybe I would have a family member or maybe a friend send me an article every once in a while talking about a character or a movie coming out. When this happened, I got 3 or 4 messages just from close friends, none of who read comic books, and all said, "Did you know that Superman is gay?" So if it wasn't your intent for the narrative to be DC Comics creates new bisexual Superman, I guess that's not what happened. They think you created the gay Superman. So you've absolutely failed. But we know that that's not the case. That was absolutely their intent. That's what the marketing strategy was all around. And it certainly wasn't anything to do with Jon Kent. They wanted to add the LGBTQ representation to the word Superman. That was the entire intent of this, no matter how Tom Taylor, Marie Javins, or anybody else at DC Comics wants to spin this. And it's, it's kind of funny that they don't have the fortitude of their beliefs in the belief in what they've done to stand by the change and say, yes, we wanted to get the word out. We wanted to get people that don't read comic books talking about this in the hopes that they'll go in, buy the comic book, read it, and decide that they're comic book readers. Spoilers, it's not going to happen. So there are going to be some people that buy this comic book so they can buy the first Superman gay kiss comic book, and that's going to be it, because that's not how you convert readers, especially not for comic books. Tom Taylor does go on. In this one, I'm going to read the quote from Tom Taylor, which I've gotten into a little bit, but I'm also going to read the information that David Betancourt, the writer for the Washington Post, actually brings up behind this, and you will see that the narrative was always supposed to be DC has created a bisexual or gay Superman, and that Tom Taylor never had any intent to really establish Jon Kent as Superman, because he did not do that. Has Jon Kent even defeated a bad guy in the fucking comic book yet? Has he, has he won the day and won the adulation and the belief of everybody in America or wherever, Metropolis, to go, you know what? Things aren't so bad now that Clark Kent's gone. His son John's pretty competent. Look, he's defeating bad guys left and right. He's already saved the world. No, he's out there doing a bunch of he's doing Tom Taylor's Twitter bidding, right? He's going out there and signal boosting Tom Taylor's personal beliefs on stuff. This is the Tom Taylor quote. Then I'll get into the David Betancourt follow-up to that, and we'll talk about it. This was an opportunity to do something different, something not seen before, and to have this Superman represent people who haven't been represented before and haven't been able to see themselves in Superman. There's 2 different statements. So, to have people that haven't been represented before, that's BS. But then have them be able to see themselves as Superman. Yeah, that's the crux of what they're actually trying to do. David Betancourt, the writer of this article, follows that up with LGBTQ superheroes are nothing new at the big 2 comics publishers. DC Comics and Marvel Comics. At DC, Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern, came out in 2012. In August, Tim Drake, the Robin of the 90s, and the third of four boy wonders to fight alongside Batman, was revealed to be bisexual. Aquaman ally, Jackson Hyde, a.k.a. Aqualad, is gay. Harley Quinn, perhaps DC's most popular character right now, has had love for the Joker and her fellow femme fatale, Poison Ivy. Marvel LGBTQ characters include America Chavez, Wiccan, who's the son of the Scarlet Witch, and X-members Iceman and Northstar. Obviously, there's far more LGBTQ representation than they've actually listed off there, including probably the most important one, because this is the follow-up sentence to that. But none of them are Superman, part of DC's elite trinity of superheroes, along with Batman and Wonder Woman. Interesting enough, Wonder Woman, has already been confirmed as LGBTQ representative, and certainly came out as a bisexual character long before Jon Kent did. So the idea that people haven't seen this representation in comic books is ridiculous, and those are only kind of the newer characters. There's been gay and bisexual and lesbian characters within comic books going back to the 80s and probably before that. There's probably some that I'm not completely aware of. So the idea that there hasn't been representation is absolute bullshit. So Tom Taylor's completely off his base on that one. And then the idea that there's never been a gay Superman. Well, he might not be Superman, but Apollo is certainly a Superman-like character and happens to be in a loving relationship with a Batman-like character named Midnighter. So there have been LGBTQ characters within the DC universe. They own the fucking characters that have the Superman power sets, the Batman power sets, and DC Comics could use these characters at every single time, but it would not have the Superman logo and the Superman cachet to go out there and do something crazy to where, this gimmick marketing to where you could go out there and every major news outlet in the world will end up covering it, and they will say nothing about Jon Kent. They'll just say there is the gay Superman, or there is the bisexual Superman, or there's the LGBTQ plus or LGBTQ Superman, and it was very effective. I'm not taking that away from him. That was effective, but the idea of what Tom Taylor had said here, I didn't want the narrative to be DC Comics creates new bisexual Superman. What he says right now, this was an opportunity to do something different, something not seen before. And I wanted to create a Superman that was representative of LGBTQ community. Of course, that's exactly what the narrative that you want to do. That's what you set out to do. That's why you didn't do anything with the character to begin with. You never established him as even Superman, let alone that, there might have been an attraction. Even if you did, it was what was it, for one issue before they're going to start kissing? So this idea that there's some like grand plan, and Tom Taylor just once he read up and knew that he was writing this Jon Kent comic book, like he knew he had to establish that Superman character, but he never wanted the narrative to be that it was just a natural progression of the character. That's absolute balderdash. And the idea that there hasn't been representation is blown up right after that by David Betancourt, the writer himself. And then the idea that there hasn't been, an LGBTQ Superman out there is absolutely balderdash as well. Apollo exists, whether you want to agree with it or not. There is a gay Batman. His name's Midnight. They're both in the DC Comics universe. Guess what DC Comics is doing with them? Jack shit. Because it's not about having characters with these power sets or having characters that represent certain, aspirational ideas within their universe also being representative of these communities. They have to have the name associated with it as well for the marketing value, because these are all just cheap marketing tricks, whether Tom Taylor wants to acknowledge that or not. Now, DC Comics editor-in-chief Marie Javins, who coincidentally did edit the debut of Jon Kent in DC Comics in Dan Jurgens' 2015 Convergent Superman #2. This is what Marie Javins had to say. And I like it when old people try to talk like they're young and cool. Gender and sexuality is so much more fluid to young people today. Our fans know that. Your fans are like mostly dudes above the age of 35. You know that too. Our retailers know that. It's been pushed back. Our staff knows that. It's not like we're all off this in this little bubble and don't know 20-year-old people. Oh, I would say that you are off in your little bubble and don't know 20-year-old people because you can't sell comic books to 20-year-old people. I'll tell you what, in 1 year, if you can show me that this has actually shifted the demographic down of the Superman readers or even the DC readers down a fraction of a year, I'll be shocked. They tried this in Marvel Comics, and it didn't work. Now they're doing it at DC Comics. So this idea that they're not in their little bubble, you can already see with what Tom Taylor is saying to the media, that they are in their little bubble. We didn't want the narrative to be that he's a bisexual Superman. That's exactly what the narrative is. If you didn't want that, you're very terrible at your job, or let's be honest. If you really believe that, you're lying to yourself. Like you turned your shoot into a work. Like, my goodness. And also, not in your little bubble. I really needed to establish Jon Kent before we could make a change like this. Yes, you fully established Jon Kent as Superman for 2 whole issues. Bree Javins continues, it's a great opportunity for us to reinvent the wheel without the destruction of the old wheel. We're just building on stuff that already exists. We still have our classic characters that everyone can read. And to me, that's really important. You don't want to take someone who has been a certain person their whole lives and then imprint your own values on that character. Oh, she admitted something there that you're not supposed to. You want to have new characters where it is more organic evolution of the personality. Unfortunately, they aren't creating new characters. Jon Kent's actually been around for a couple minutes now. It's kind of established who he is and what he stood for. This new version by Tom Taylor, which apparently has established the new Jon Kent, has actually just flipped him around, and the character's almost unrecognizable. But that part that Marie Javins is very telling. You don't want to take someone who has been a certain person their whole lives, i.e. the character, and then imprint your own values on that character. So it's certainly telling that Tom Taylor is imprinting his own values on Jon Kent because they consider this a new character, even though there's certainly been plenty of character progression for Jon Kent. Let's not talk about Bendis, the ruining of the character within his Superman run and then Legion of Superheroes, where he certainly had his first kiss. And, we saw Future State where apparently he and Yara Flor were in a loving relationship together. But we're in the Omniverse, so I guess none of that really happened, or it all happened. I don't know. But with what Peter J. Tomasi and Dan Jurgens had done with the character already, they had established personality traits. They'd established who the character was moving towards. Now, obviously, he's a young character, so you can't change him. But the idea that, or anyone pushing back to say, no, Tom Taylor's not imprinting his own personal values on the character. This is a natural progression of what the character is. Bullshit. Marie Javins just said, you can't do that on established characters. You have to do it on these new characters. And we wonder why Jackson Hyde is going to be the new Aquaman. Because you can't change, Arthur Curry. We got new Jackson Hyde, who's not as well known. We can go and print our own personal values on that character and use him as a mouthpiece. And I wonder what they're going to do with Yara Flor, the new soon-to-be Wonder Woman. I mean, how many Wonder Woman do we have now? 4 of them? Now, obviously, we've got a new Batman, Jace Fox, within, I guess he's going to New York. Blank slate. You can imprint all of your own personal values on that character now because they don't need to be unique characters unto themselves. They need to be, just mouthpieces for the political and personal views of the writers and the editorial staff. As Marie Javins has just mentioned right here, when they said, you don't want to take someone who has been a certain person their whole lives and then imprint their own values on that character. I wonder why we have Teen Lantern and Joe Mullins coming to the forefront of DC Comics as the most important lanterns out there. I thought I was supposed to be reading a John Stewart comic from old bait and switch Jeff Thorne. Turns out it's a Joe Mullins Teen Lantern comic. I wonder why those characters are being pushed to the forefront. Could it be so they could imprint their own values on the characters and use them as mouthpieces for whatever political or ideological sounding board that they want them to? I mean, I'm surprised she said this, but I do want to say thank you very much to Marie Javins for letting the cat out of the bag and at least admitting what we've been talking about on here on the channel for over a year and a half now. I wonder why we have to make these kind of changes to all these characters and why The idea, remember when they did the DC Comics round robin and people were upset, why would you put JLQ up against Robins? Well, why wouldn't have they? They have JLQ now. And they've done it in a matter of less than a year. Do we think this wasn't the plan all along? They didn't want that one to win. They needed Robins to beat it out so they could actually just go and do the idea. They got the publicity. They got to say we're going to do it, and now it's been enacted. And, you know, this is all by design. You can see it from Marie Javins. They are going to use these characters to imprint their own values and get them out there. And that's what they're using the DC Comics heroes for. That's why they don't feel right. That's why all of this feels rushed and it doesn't feel organic. And you're like, this feels like bullshit, because it is bullshit. Tom Taylor is feeding himself lies or you lies. The narrative for this Superman change was so that they can say they had a bisexual or gay Superman. They get that word out there, because it's not important to have bisexual superheroes. It's not important to have gay superheroes. It's not important to have lesbian superheroes. It's not important to have LGBTQ representative superheroes in their universes. It's not even important to have Superman-like gay characters or Batman-like gay characters in the DC universe. You have that in Apollo and Midnighter. They don't do anything with those characters. It's important that it's Superman. And it's important that they be able to take Superman and the name and the mantle stripped away from Clark Kent and be able to imprint their own values on the character. The disconnect between DC Comics and their readers is farther than it's ever been. They want everybody in the world to read their comics but you and I. They don't want the readers anymore, and they think that they can replace the readers as they're driving them away with newer, younger readers. Hey, 20-year-olds are absolutely reading comic books. They're not spending $5 a pop for 24 pages, monthly for these comic books. They're going and they're reading manga, and they're reading other graphic novels. Periodic comics don't have to die. But with the decision-making going on at Marvel and obviously here at DC Comics, they will. They're going to will it. They're going to will periodic comics out of existence as far as being, something that you can rely on to be coming out weekly or monthly. They're going to will, the crowdfunding comic market to become, more important than they are as far as new comic books. They're going to actively drive people away, trying to convert the readers that they hate into the readers that they want. I hate to break it to them. The readers you want are already reading comics, and they just ain't reading yours. But we're reading your comics, and you keep telling us to fuck off. Eventually, we're going to listen. That's all I'm saying.